Hello, and welcome to Forum 360, your global outlook with a local view. I'm your host, Brian Murphy. The fragrant smell of crab apples, magnolia, or lilacs. You go to your farmer's market to taste fresh strawberries or your local sugar maple. You put out your coneflower to hear the sound of a hummingbird or a rabbit hustling around in your bushes. You take a walk in the metro parks to see the beautiful color flowers of the daffodils and tulips, or to enjoy soft fountain grass or pussy willows. These are great examples of how our senses are engaged every day. Where else are these sensory gardens? To answer this question, someone who knows a great deal about sensory gardens, our guest today, Keep Akron Beautiful Flowerscape Director, Leah Heiser. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. Before we go, I want to tell where they can see your blog at www.keepakronbeautiful.com.
.org.
Yes. .org. And they'll be able to see your blog about sensory gardens?
Yes, you go to the tab that says blog and it'll show up right away.
Great. You know, I wanted to dive into these sensory gardens, and I wanted to talk about the impact it has on the community, how to create your sensory garden, and how somebody like me who doesn't know much about it, how to go about doing it. But before I do that, okay, I think it's important that we understand who you are,
okay,
and maybe some of your history. Have you always liked flowers?
I have.
Yeah.
I grew up in the garden.
Okay.
Both of my parents are active gardeners.
Okay.
So I've always been exposed to flowers and vegetables. Gosh, I knew what a daisy was when I was 4 years old.
Now, did you? Okay, so you knew what a daisy was. So
yeah.
As you were growing up, was there a certain flower that that attracted you the most, or was it just you liked them all, or what?
Oh, I liked them all.
You did?
Yeah, everybody has their favorite flowers. I definitely still have my favorites. But I really like them all. It's hard to pick.
So here you are. You went to college?
Yes.
Where'd you go to school?
I went to Kent State. I have a degree in communication studies, a minor in organizational communication.
Yes.
It's interesting because I work in horticulture. So
correct. So
who would have thought that?
Who knows? You know, it's amazing. So that's a good question. So you went to school, communications director.
Yes.
You graduate and.
Yes. Well, during school, I worked at a company called Blooming Designs as a perennial and annual specialist. Actually, before I got my degree in communication studies, I was dabbling in art education. So
excellent. Okay.
I thought I always wanted to be an art teacher. I could never find my medium, though. I was in art classes. I went to Spring Garden Waldorf School, to Miller South, to Firestone for the visual performing arts.
You're Akronite.
So I'm born and raised in Akron, and I've always had a passion for the arts. I could never find my medium. Cool. When I started working at Blooming Designs, I had this epiphany, said, okay, this is the medium I want to work in. So that's where my true interest in gardening kind of got sparked.
I love that. Did you start to look at two flowers and put them together like that?
Yes, it was the textures and how they grew together. Doing container gardening is actually what really sparked my interest in
container gardens. What is a container garden?
Planting in pots.
Planting in pots.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Maybe give it.
Yes. So basically, instead of doing ground plantings, that's where I started was creating just like pots like this, bigger pots in a vignette, a grouping, and then creating kind of a beautiful display with annuals and perennials in that sense.
I love that.
That's kind of where I was like, this is exactly what I want to do. This is so much fun. And then the more I did it, the more I learned about plants. That's when I realized that this is not just about aesthetics and beautification, that there's an underlining value that's so much deeper than beautification. It's you're creating wildlife or habitat for wildlife. You're helping the environment. So that's what really struck this passion with me, that, you know, the landscape it's a living art form, but it's so much more than that. It's we need it in our society to help with our wildlife.
Totally agree. You know, I was researching you, and you wrote this blog, and you just kind of ran right into this what you were just talking about. So before we go into this, what your blog was about, each of the senses, because each one of them has its own characteristic, is that what made you write about the blog? What made you inspired to write something about the senses in gardens?
Well, really, it came down to the fact that my main goal, the thing that I'm the most interested in, is getting other people passionate about nature and about gardening. And the way to do that is to show that we can get some sort of instant gratification from spending time in a natural setting. And you can even expedite that almost by designing in a particular way, designing for the senses. If you have a disability, per se, you can design a garden that's going to help you experience the garden in a different way.
For example, probably like if we were talking about being blind, someone who's blind who you create a garden, they smell the flowers, or we're talking about like certain flowers that attract animals. A waterfall, just that is so soothing.
So there's this term, biophilia. Have you ever heard this term?
I have not.
Okay, it's one of my favorite terms. It's our innate human need to reconnect with nature that we all have.
Biophilia.
Biophilia.
Okay, got it.
Yes. So I think that's what really got me on this journey towards getting people engaged with the garden. There's so much research out there that proves that spending time in green space lowers blood pressure, helps with dementia. Even hospital patients that have a room with a window or even a painting of a green space heal quicker than those without. And the research is out there, and it's just outstanding how impactful green spaces are. So that's, to get back to your question, that's really why I wrote
you're
this
doing this.
blog.
I love it. I love it. And I get into the hospital setting, for example. You know, it's not. My research was asking people the questions. Have you ever seen a sensory garden? Well, there are hospitals around the country that have these gardens. You don't realize they're there. It's sort of a subliminal, subconscious thing that happens, but you have a feeling of warmth as opposed to a stale feeling in just a hospital setting. So let's go through this blog, okay? And each one of them, again, has its own characteristics.
Yeah.
And I want to make sure that we get through each one of those, and maybe at the end of each one of them, as we can separate them. How do we create our own, and what flowers do you think would be good?
Okay.
All right. So and I just want to name. Maybe you should name the 5 senses. Let's just name the 5 senses so we all can hear. What are the 5 senses?
Okay, there's sight, there's smell, there's sound, touch, and taste.
You did a lot faster than I did. Very good. So I want to start with sight.
Okay.
Okay. Maybe, talk to me about some of the flowers that really accentuate sight.
Okay, one of the most important things to note is that a lot of gardeners spend so much time beautifying their space throughout the growing season. They often forget that we spend a lot of time without being in the growing season, fall and winter. So the main thing to appeal to sight is to have a full season interest.
Full season interest.
Yes,
okay, got
yes.
it. Okay.
And so you can get that through the use of bulbs in the spring, ephemerals for wooded lots, then spring blooming flowers, summer, fall, and then your winter interests. So it's really.
So when do you start? When if you were to say, okay, if I was somebody who came to you, I said, Leah, I really want to create a site-centric garden. You would say to me, number 1.
Number one, well, I would say, what kind of environment do you have?
In my house. So say I want to have one in my house, right?
In your house.
Yeah, say I want one in my house or in my garden outside. And I really want this beautiful beautiful, but I just don't know where to begin.
Yeah, the main thing is to work with the land that you have. And I can't stress that enough, is that you have to do a site analysis, because you can't just grow anything anywhere that you want. You have to see the sun patterns, see what kind of soil you have. And then after that, I would say, okay, well, you need your bulbs. You need your... I love annuals. I can never get rid of annuals.
Love annuals.
Not a huge... you can't have a whole bed full of annuals, because that's just too much maintenance and takes a lot of resources. And then your herbaceous perennials.
Okay.
And then take note that your herbaceous perennials have fall interest.
Okay.
So for example, Amsonia is one of my favorite native wild plants. I'm sure you know exactly what that is.
I know exactly what those are. I'm sure. I love this. I love it. I'm learning so much. I mean, I've never heard of it before, to be honest. So
Amsonia, it's a native plant. It gets about 2 feet wide, 3 feet tall. Has spring flowers that are light blue. In the summer, it has an interesting green foliage. In the fall, it gets yellow.
I can't wait. I am going to go to a local store and get one of those.
Yes, it's great. I love them. I use them a lot, just for that main purpose, that they have 3 seasons full of interest. And yes, they die back in the winter, but that's getting the most bang for your buck, I guess.
That's great.
So
what do you think of mums?
Chrysanthemums? I like mums. I like them for container gardening.
Container gardening, okay, got it. Okay, excellent. So I go to, there's like a local mums fest that I've gone to over the years, and beautiful mums. Now, they only last like a week?
Yeah, they're not proliferous that way. But what's interesting is that a lot of garden centers, they don't sell mums now as perennial mums. They used to way a lot of years ago. But now, because a lot of growers have tinkered with the formula, making different colors and different hardiness, they no longer sell them as perennial mums. However, I've noticed, and I've talked to other people about this too, that if you can plant your mum in the ground early enough, they'll come back for you year after year.
We need to remember that. That's good information, actually, because it always seems like they just sort of, you know, after a couple of weeks you buy it, they're like...
And then they die, and then people are like, why didn't they come back next year? Because you didn't put them in the ground soon enough.
So is this the perfect time? So September, October time,
or sooner? I would put them in end of August and September.
Okay, so if you're listening to this, you better have them by now, right?
in a couple of weeks, when they start coming out, you want to buy them and plant them in the ground, and that's only if you want to perennialize them. So
perfect.
You know.
So today we have Leah Heiser, and she is the director of Flowerscape at Keep Akron Beautiful. Did I get that correct?
Yes.
Excellent. Excellent. Yes. And you can see her blog, which we're talking about right now, at www.keepakronbeautiful.org. .org. So continue on. So site. Okay. So
we talked about site.
We talked about site. We have 4 more to get through here. So but it excites me. It's very exciting. So let's go into smell.
Okay.
So the old mantra, stop and smell the roses. I mean, it literally means stop and smell what's around you. So talk to me about some of the roses, besides roses. What are the flowers that you would say are good ones to stop and like smell?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. And before I go into that, I just really quick want to mention that our olfactory smelling sense, that is so closely related to memory. So what can be so healing in a sensory garden is to think about the kind of smells you grew up with when you were younger. Maybe your grandmother planted lilacs, and how healing would that be to plant a lilac outside of your bedroom window?
That's interesting. You're right.
Yes,
so we don't know what that is until we go into a store and we kind of smell around, and something that catches our senses or catches our feeling inside.
Yes.
And you're like, you know what? That lilac reminds me of when I was a childhood, a positive memory.
Yes.
You put that in your house. Oh, very interesting. Okay, good. So got the lilac. Now,
lilac,
go ahead.
trees and shrubs, your herbaceous perennial layer, and then a ground cover. I can't stress that enough, that it's so important to have layers and successions of blooms and scents in your garden. So magnolias bloom in the spring. They smell heavenly. Then shortly after that, you have your lily of the valley. And I could really go on. And roses in the midsummer.
Yes.
So, yeah, to have a succession of smells.
Succession of smells.
Yes.
And before I get away from smells, when I go down to Florida and I smell that sweetness, what is that?
I don't know.
Sweetness there's a sweetness.
Maybe it's the crepe myrtle.
It could be that. I've been going down to Florida for many years, and it attracts my senses of it when I was younger.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, and I don't know what I never knew what the name of the flower was, but it's kind of sweet. But I think a lot of us can relate to that kind of smell, like you were just talking about.
Well, if it is the crepe myrtle, you can. It's becoming a little bit more, since our zones are changing. We were a zone 6. We're now a zone 5 in Ohio.
That's
so
interesting.
People are starting to experiment, horticulturalists, with bringing up crepe myrtle from the southern states. If it's very protected, it's been fine. So
that's kind of interesting. That's a whole other conversation about zones, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Well, but it can affect how we create our sensory garden too.
It does.
Right?
It really does.
So let's go to another one, and not taste. It's kind of interesting because we have what do you call it? We put it in our seasoning.
Yeah, herbs.
Herbs, a big deal for all of us.
Yes.
Growing, I thought you could grow strawberries, but can you?
Oh yeah.
Okay, you can grow strawberries.
Oh yeah,
okay.
And the big thing that I see a trend in now in landscaping is combining, especially with our urban environments, we're very limited with amounts of space. People are combining their perennials with vegetables, which is so cool to have hostas and then a rhubarb right next to it.
It is.
And rhubarb kind of looks like a hosta, so it's...
I love it. You're right. And my mom has a garden, and she's got lots of herbs and lots of vegetables. And over the years, it just blossom to all kinds of stuff. So
it's really beautiful when people combine the two and use vegetables as an aesthetic in their garden.
So before I go on to the next one, is your house full of flowers?
Oh, of course. Of course it is.
And do you have like herbs too? Do you have like a mirage of different things?
Oh yes. Yeah, and I combine my perennials and my vegetables together. So I have my lilies right next to my tomatoes, next to my rosemary, and
that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Love it.
So, yeah.
That means that any of us can do it if we need to.
You don't need a green thumb. You just need to read the plant tag and have good soil.
Plant tag.
Yes, read your plant tag.
Something good to know. Okay, so now the sound one, the hummingbird. Some people can attract hummingbirds, some people can't. Why is that?
That is such an important question, and I'm so glad you brought that up because I've actually, for the second time, I'm rereading this book. It's called Bringing Nature Home by Rick Dark, and it's about how you can sustain wildlife in your backyard. And essentially, if you want birds to come to your garden, you have to have plants that support the insect life that attracts those birds.
Interesting.
So without the bugs, you don't get the birds.
So what bugs attract hummingbirds?
I guess, hummingbirds, that doesn't apply to hummingbirds, I guess. It
does not, okay.
Because they're nectar sucking birds, but they love Monarda. Okay. Red Monarda. Every time I've ever planted.
Red Monarda.
Yes, bee balm is the common name.
Got it. So I'm fascinated now about the bugs and birds. Okay. So give me an example of a bug that would attract a certain bird.
Okay. Well, before I do that, I do want to talk briefly about milkweed and the monarch butterfly, because it's very interesting how our insects are specialized species. And so essentially insects have to have an evolutionary history, mainly with the plant that they've had a history with in order to be able to eat it. So a monarch, for instance, is a specialized species. It can only use the milkweed as a host plant. So as the eggs, the larvae, and then also for pollen. So without milkweed, it's very hard to find monarch butterflies.
Interesting.
And so when we get into the specifics about what insects birds actually like to eat, they're not as specialized as we might think. And I don't really have a good answer for you. But I do know that especially during the springtime, when they're feeding their nestlings, they need as many bugs as they possibly can get. And we are taking away a lot of native plants provide a host for our insects. So when we are planting natives versus aliens in our garden, we're creating a habitat that's going to be welcoming birds.
And we fight that a lot because of urban development and stuff like that. You know, a lot of, so, but the last one is touch. You know, I think all of us want to go around and start touching flowers. Probably certain ones you shouldn't touch, but we want to anyways. So give us a couple ones that are fun to touch. I mean, if I was somebody who would to just kind of go like this, which one would you put in my hand?
Oh, I would put lamb's ear.
Lamb's ear.
Definitely lamb's ear. That's very silver foliage, fuzzy, and a general rule of thumb, we're getting off topic here a little bit, but if you have deer problems in your neighborhood, any sort of silver, fuzzy foliage, deer tend to stay away from. So that's
important
thing.
to know.
Yes.
That's important to know. I like that. I like that a lot, actually. So, you know, again, all this information is good, and I think it's important. If I wanted all of these type of gardens to be in my house or around my home, look at the little tab. The little thing about the flower, right? That doesn't tell you when to plant them. You got to do your research on what type of year, right?
Rule of thumb: best time to install perennials is in the fall.
In the fall, okay.
By far the fall. You can also do it early spring, but I do all of my perennial installations in the fall.
Wonderful. That's good to know. That's really good to know. So I wanted to, towards the end here, do what you call lightning round. Okay. So I'm going to ask, first of all, this has been a great conversation.
Yeah, I wish we had more time.
It just feels like it's very organic. It's important, and we didn't go into all the importance of it. And I think maybe touch on that right now.
Why does this matter?
Why does this matter? Good question.
It matters a lot because when you spend time in a green space and it's appealing to your senses, it's taking you outside of yourself. You are no longer thinking about, oh, this trouble at work or this social media post, or you're not thinking about yourself. You're outside enjoying something, and it reminds you of your place in this world, and that we are all connected, and that there's a deeper nature appreciation that needs to go on. And it's just so wonderful to be taken outside of yourself and to think about and observe something that's going on, and just to be so distracted. And how healing is that? Really?
I don't think you could put it any other better way. I think that, you know, again, I go back to that mantra, to stop and smell the roses. It's such a overused one, but an important one. Because I think that flowers provide an outlet.
They do.
Escape, or just a moment of pause.
Yes, and it's that our innate need to reconnect with nature, that term biophilia. We all have it, and to embrace that is to reconnect with a deeper connection to Mother Nature. Really
important. And there's so many resources around here to do that.
Absolutely.
Get on a bike,
Metro
walk,
parks, all of the. We live in such a great area.
And I mean, we can go and hold another session on what Keep Akron Beautiful does.
Yes, which if you want a little break from urban environments, please come check out any of my gardens. I have 32 of them throughout all of downtown Akron.
Give us, we have a minute here.
Okay.
Give us 6 places to go.
Okay, Alexander Park is a great park. It's West Market Street, right across the street from the McDonald's if you're heading down towards downtown Akron.
Perfect.
Another place, the Municipal Building, Civic Mall area, lots of perennials and annuals, very vivacious. I'm very excited about a strip that I have right by the Akron Art Museum on High Street,
okay.
where I have the Verbena bonariensis and orange cannas in a very long row, repetitive, and it is just stunning, if I must say so myself.
I love it. I can't wait to go see it.
Yes, and oh gosh.
Give me one more.
Okay. Oh gosh. Cascade Plaza is also really nice. I have Vinca up there, so it's very streamlined, looks very nice though.
This is fantastic.
Yeah.
I don't think you could have said it any better about the impact Century Gardens has on our community and ourselves
yes.
and our community. Thank you so much for writing that blog.
Thank you.
Leah Heiser with Keep Akron Beautiful. She wrote a blog on www.keepakronbeautiful.org about Century Gardens. Thank you.
Forum 360 is brought to you by Electrical Impulse Communications, the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, Hudson Community Television, the Rubber City Radio Group, an anonymous donor, the Jewish Community Board of Akron, Medical Mutual of Ohio, Blue Green, and Forum 360 supporters.